Good evening and welcome to Viewpoint. Over the next hour we'll be looking at the beautiful Upper Rock and discussing what's working well there and what might be done differently. My panel tonight, from my right to left, Dr Keith Bensusan, representing the Gibraltar Ornithological and Natural History Society. Good evening, Keith. Good evening, Charlie Perez, who's also representing GONHS, the General Secretary. Good evening to Richard Desoisa, Rock and Fortress. Your business is based within the Upper Rock. And good evening to Professor Clive Finlayson, who's the Director of the Gibraltar Museum. We'll tap into their extensive experience in just a short while. But as our pictures tonight will testify, the Upper Rock is a real gem. It's very rich in biodiversity. Birds, flora and fauna. Its natural beauty draws 750,000 visitors every year. Yet, a report carried out by GONHS in 2005 and released earlier this year concluded that the Upper Rock has largely been allowed to fall into a state of neglect. With the recent change of government, it's perhaps no surprise that the GSLP Liberal administration has accused the GSD of abandoning the issue.
There hasn't been management. I mean, there were some improvements through the years. There's an Upper Rock team now that does excellent work in managing the paths and so on, and that's of recent construction. But again, there's no coordination, so basically it's a big vacuum.
Mr. Cortez highlighted traffic and transport problems and ruled out large-scale culling of Barbary macaques. Given the large number of visitors, the Minister for Tourism is keen to work with his environment counterpart to cater for the tourists' needs as well as conservation and heritage.
We believe that the Upper Rock is first and foremost a conservation area that has to be protected, but that is married into the fact that we as a government will give new impetus to the tourism product of Gibraltar.
The government has said it will soon conduct a public consultation exercise before drafting up a detailed plan for change in the Upper Rock. So the question is, what needs changing? Keith and Charlie, you co-authored this extensive document. A tough task, but what are its main findings? Charlie, would you like to go first?
Well, the main findings in the Upper Rock Nature Reserve, we looked at different aspects ranging from the tourism, the traffic and transport issues, the wildlife, ecology, geology, caves. Every single aspect was looked into in great depth, and we looked at problems and opportunities. We looked at a way forward. We investigated the way that management plan would be developed in order to sustain sustainable tourism and the environment could work together. So it was a report that done in great depth that looked at all aspects of like this.
Okay. Keith, what's working well in your opinion, having co-authored this report? What's working well in the Upper Rock at the moment?
Well, I think regrettably very little, Jonathan. It's a tremendous resource that we have. It's full of fantastic natural assets. Gibraltar as a whole has an incredible array of heritage buildings and artifacts and so forth. And I'm afraid that unfortunately we're not selling ourselves for what we're worth. Basically, we're selling ourselves short.
Richard, I know that you appeared on a Viewpoint about a year ago discussing tourism in particular, and you concurred with the view just expressed by Dr. Bensusan that we are very much selling ourselves short, that there's more up there, we could make more of it.
Sad to say, this report, if I remember correctly, was prepared towards the latter end of 2005.
That's right, yes.
2012 and nothing has changed.
Well, actually, Richard, the report was prepared mainly in 2003. It was published at the beginning of 2005.
So here we have a report that's been lying idle for 8 years.
Well, I mean, we can get to perhaps the issue of what might have changed since. I mean, you've said not much, but I'm sure there are things which are dated now. Well, correct me if I'm wrong.
There are very little things that are dated. A lot of the goals and objectives are still valid even today, and they could be a useful tool in going ahead with the management plan. But unfortunately, the way things went is that the government of the day didn't address the issues, and they they neglected to take this on board.
Professor Finlayson, if we can bring you in, you work sort of in international circles with academics who come here for the CALPA conference, among other things. It can't be difficult to sell Gibraltar and its value for academia, in sort of archaeology, in history, in botany. There's a lot there. Why are we selling ourselves short?
It's very easy to sell Gibraltar when you have groups of people like academics and so on. And it has built up over the years. The product that we have is so incredibly wonderful. Perhaps we're too close, we're too close to it and we don't realize that it isn't difficult at all. The paradox is that what the general visitor gets sold are apes and shopping in Main Street. And that for me is the ultimate paradox, that you have something, such a wonderful treasure, such a jewel that could lots of people could benefit from if you do it sustainably, but at the same time, it's not known out there. And for me, that's an incredible paradox.
Sure. Well, I mean, before moving on to perhaps what we'd like to see done differently in the Upper Rock, let's stay a little bit further with, for a little bit longer, on what the situation is at the moment, Richard. Do you agree with Professor Finlayson that the tourists who visit Gibraltar at the moment aren't perhaps looking for, or aren't tapping into the wide array of heritage sites and natural history that they could?
Okay, I agree with all the panelists at the present moment, and it concurs with my opinion about a year ago. Let me try it and equate it in rational terms. In tourism terms, we're currently running a fast food restaurant.
Okay.
And in a fast food restaurant, volume counts. Quality goes by the way, because inevitably you have to go for volume. Okay? That being the case, we have a number of sites which cannot ever possibly deal with the volumes which are thrust on it. And I'll give you a case in point. Yesterday, liner arrives. If you try to get to St. Michael's Cave, you would find it impossible. Absolutely. All one side of the road was completely full of taxis. There were about 20 coaches there, and about 1,000 people trying to get into the cave, being harassed by apes. Now, I as a tourist, if I get thrust into that sort of scenario, I walk away from that, two things come to mind. First, I've not enjoyed this experience at all, and get me out of here.
Sure. Keith, do you agree with that analogy? Is it a fast food tourism product?
Yes, and I was just about to add to what Richard was saying, because I think the key to any healthy economy, not just tourist products, is diversity. And we have that diversity, we're just not utilising it. By making use of it, we would both improve our product and we'd lessen the burden on each of the individual products. I mean, the way that some of these products, if you want to call them that, are being managed is just not sustainable at the moment.
Okay, well, we'll just remind our viewers at home that you can call and email in to have your say, viewpoint@gbc.gi, or call 200 79810, and we'll get to your views very, very shortly. We've got some emails here. Let's start talking about some slightly more specific issues. The current state of the Upper Rock in terms of first impressions, the aesthetics, are things still as bad as you painted them in your report? Are things looking shoddy and poorly kept?
They still are, actually. In a way, the Upper Rock benefited from a closing time, which didn't allow the general public to go up the rock after hours. That improved the situation in that refuse and takeaways were not disposed of in little corners in the Upper Rock, so that was an improvement. But nevertheless, the pressures on the Upper Rock with vandalism, with graffiti, still exists, even up to this day. And there has to be some more policing and enforcement to deter these people up there. It is a wonderful product. We need to have some vigilance and some improvement. There needs to be a wardening as well to keep an eye on our product, because otherwise everything is just going the wrong way.
Richard, you run various websites related to travelling to Gibraltar, if I'm not mistaken. Do you have feedback on there, and if so, is that the sort of thing that you hear? That
curiously enough, I have a website where my products are illustrated. Not only that, I think I must be unique as one of the operators. Whenever a client comes to see me, I give them a leaflet which contains what my products are, what they have been, an email address, the website address.
For the sake of those not familiar with the businesses, can you talk us through them very quickly? What do you do in the Upper Rock?
Well, I run two sites. One is the World War II tunnels located at Hayes Level and exiting at Princess Anne's Battery, and the other one lately of 2 years is O'Hara's Battery. Both of them are magnificent, but without going into the products themselves, one of the key issues, and again we go back to the fast food element, nobody is particularly interested in what the client cares. I care. For me it's important. For me it's important to know how I can improve my business. For me it's important to be able to share with my staff, Mr. and Mrs. Smith from Roehampton really enjoyed your tour. Thank you for the work you have done. None of that exists on the fast food element. You just do your business in a way. For me, that is important. Now, going on from what Keith has said, and I think evolving into what it could possibly be, we have a wealth of things which could be done if we were structured and organized in order to be able to do that. You allude to it in your report by the hop-on, hop-off basis. Okay? Now, we're not discovering the wheel here. You go to any major city in Europe and you have this facility. You could have it in Gibraltar.
Okay, Professor Finlayson, hop on, hop off. Is that the sort of thing that you think would work well?
I wrote a report for government in 1988 or 87,
right,
precisely recommending park and ride, hop on, hop off. I'm not saying it to simply claim anything, but very often I've been long enough working in government service to see things coming over and over again and not getting done. The other is this trick, I mean, of the mass tourism. Simply put, 100 people spending £1 or 10 spending £10 leaves it the same, but 10 spending £10 actually create less of an impact. And it seems to me that the problem in discussing this over and over again over the years has been nobody's been willing to risk the switch and maybe, killing the goose that lays the golden egg in the process. But what seems to me that happens, and a lot of it is controlled from outside, for a lot of these groups coming in, is there's so much pressure to return. Very often the meals are held, are arranged in Spain or whatever, that you have to circulate people very quickly. They don't end up with a good experience of Gibraltar. What you really want is to keep fewer people for longer here and spending a lot more. And clearly in switching from one to another, there's always going to be a risk. And maybe not everybody wants to do this. Clearly, this is just a suggestion. But these are arguments that I've heard over and over. And what I ask myself is, why doesn't it ever happen?
Can I just come back on what Clive has just said? Yes. We are responsible for the fast food element which we have. And I explain myself. In business, you have an element of competition. So you have a number of operators who have all, in the process of trying to get that business, cheapened the product. Let me just give you some figures. Somebody in Torremolinos or Benalmádena wants to come to Gibraltar, he will pay 51 euros. Of those 51 euros, 14 stay here in Gibraltar. 6 go to the tourist board, and 8 goes to the operator.
The local tourist board?
Yes, local tourist board and the local operator. Now, I ask myself, the chap across the way must be laughing out of his socks. He doesn't have to provide any of the sites, doesn't have to clean up afterwards.
Doesn't have to maintain them.
All he's got to do is pick up people, drive them here, and thank you very much indeed. Now, why has that happened? That has happened because we have not had the confidence or the unity in ourselves, or we have not had an organization to say, no, Gibraltar will be priced at X, and this is what it's worth. Well, you have classic examples of that, like the Alhambra, which is a government-run organization. You pay through the nose to get in there, but hey, there is no discount, there is no commission. This is a product. This is what it costs to maintain it. This is what we want.
Exactly. Nobody gets a concessionary rate at all. They have to pay for, and in that way they can increase the quality of the product at the end of the day. And that is what we're looking at, to increase the quality of the sites, to improve the quality of the sites for the tourists, and also to diversify what we have. We have a great product up there which we can expand on, and the opportunities are there for the tourist office and other government departments to take benefit of.
Okay, well, we've got a few emails coming in, so perhaps I should thank first our viewers for sending in their emails. A few questions here from Charles, who says he's very happy, firstly, that something's going to be done on the Upper Rock, and he's looking forward to seeing how this report might be or might inform government policy in the coming months. He says that he fully agrees that we should have a team of wildlife wardens. Perhaps we can pick up on that point, because I think that was one of the significant suggestions that you both make in the report.
Yep, absolutely essential. Before we move on to that, Richard raised an interesting point with regard to the leaflet. Actually, when we prepared this report, we also prepared a little guidebook for visitors to the Upper Rock. And because the report was EU funded, we produced, I don't know if it was 500 or 1,000, something along those lines. And the guidebook outlined the main attractions, both the natural, heritage, so forth, several walks along the Upper Rock as well. Sadly, once that stock was handed out for free, it was discontinued. And that reflects the attitude that sadly...
Keith, that shouldn't shock you. No. I've been on the Upper Rock with 2 sites for 7 years. I only appeared on the Upper Rock map last year.
Yeah, well, I mean, after having prepared that report for a whole year, believe me, it didn't shock me. But in wildlife wardens, absolutely essential. There's an urgent need for policing up on the Upper Rock. Huge litter problems. Let's not even talk about the feeding of the macaques. Actually, we probably will talk about that.
Well, I was going to say, we're 50, quarters of the way through the programme. We should perhaps tackle the macaques, which is a big issue, I think, for people certainly living in the Upper Town and people who generally love the Upper Rock and are saddened, perhaps, by the way
I think if you approach the police about this issue, they might tell you that they're stretched and that they can't provide police presence at all times. And I think they're probably right. And I think what we need are wardens who know what they're doing, who can, in addition, inform tourists about the biology, behaviour, and so forth of the macaque. So, yes, absolutely.
How large a team does the report think would be needed?
Well, I think the report recommended something along the region of 6 wardens.
Okay.
I would go further. I would say that 1 for each site at which macaques are present. Sure. As well as maybe 2 wardens roaming the
more generally.
Yeah.
I'd like to come in on the warden issue, because I think it's something that should have been done a significant amount of time ago. But there are 2 issues here which are relevant, I think. One is the quality provision of information. Don't just need wardens, but generally. There's nothing to replace good storytelling. Nothing to replace good storytelling. We have an opportunity here to do that with things that are authentic. I've referred to the idea of a theme park, but with authentic items. And many years ago, I used to be involved in preparing lectures and running courses for guides with the tourist board. And that sadly was taken away from us. And I think it's important that the quality of the provision of information should start from the top. If we're people all around the table here with a lot of knowledge because we do a lot of research into this field, well, we should be directly involved in that provision of that information because there's nothing to substitute for good storytelling. The other side of the wardens is it's terribly important, but provided they have clout and they exercise it, because as Keith has said, the police are rarely seen on the Upper Rock, but there are security guards at particular points, and the impression I have is that they have no authority to do anything. Put it to the test. But even then, the traffic doesn't necessarily respond to the guys. So wardens, yes, like we have legislation, yes, like you say in your report. But what's the point of having a £500 sign, don't feed the apes, when everybody feeds the apes in front of you, in front of the sign? So definitely important, but it has to have that clout, otherwise what's the point?
I'd like to take you up on the point of storytelling in specific. I'd like for you to tell us a little story about Gibraltar's caves in a short while, if that's okay. And similarly, for Charlie and Keith to talk about bird migration, perhaps, because sometimes we take it for granted that you know, all these things are common knowledge when they're not necessarily for somebody who hasn't looked into it. But I think we'll come back to that, if that's okay, Charlie, and we'll say hello and good evening to Al and ask you for your question or viewpoint, please, Al.
Well, actually, I have a few, yeah? The first one is, I would like to know why there's not someone from the tourist board there on the panel.
Okay, yes.
Because we're talking about the Upper Rock.
Right. And what's your next point?
The other point is that I know Keith and Charlie well, and they're doing a fantastic job. And Richard as well. And every point they have come across is totally correct. And also Dr. Finlayson on the aspect of the security guards not having a voice or not being able to do anything. The thing is that we are not taking the greatest amount of enjoyment out of the rock. We work, there's a group of us up there doing the maintenance, and we work damn hard, but we're not appreciated.
Okay, thank you for your call. Thank you for your call, Al.
I haven't finished yet.
Well, can you hurry up, please?
Well, carry on. I'll let you get on as well.
Okay, thank you for your call, Al. So the composition of the panel tonight could have been, you know, we could have had 20 different people here, all with very worthwhile views. This is the panel that we have selected. I think that Richard adequately represents tourism tonight, and there'll be many more discussions, I'm sure, in the coming weeks and perhaps months, depending on how soon government conducts its consultation exercise. But does somebody want to take up Al on his point that there are some people working hard up there at the moment?
Simply to say that actually one of the few changes that has been made since the report is the implementation of this group of really hard-working guys, the Upper Rock team, who carry out both path maintenance and habitat management. Okay. And some really important things coming out of this. I mean, fire breaks, for example, some of them had been neglected now for decades and were woodland almost. And these guys have actually been working so hard to clear these areas and make them valuable for wildlife.
Okay, and they're looking better now.
Absolutely.
Well, not only looking better, but there are important areas for floral interest. There are certain plants that grow in open areas, and the open areas on the Upper Rock are being restricted by the intense growth of olive scrub all the way along. So they are doing an excellent job clearing pathways, removing invasive species, which is another of the problems of the nature reserve.
Opening up new pathways as well. I mean, we haven't really spoken yet about the value of the Upper Rock for walkers.
Well, I was going to say, if we want to discourage traffic, or at least contain it, then you know that work in clearing paths, I suppose, is very important to encourage people to walk.
If a walker comes to Jews Gate, it's very difficult to walk along the roadside because there's no pavement. So obviously, what you want is a clear pathway from Jews Gate up to St Michael's Cave, and these guys have done that clearing. They've cleared Mediterranean steps, English Way. So it's providing avenues for walkers as well, which is important. Remember that even the Upper Rock, the roads that were restricted only to MOD vehicles are now open to taxis, and it's difficult even for walkers to come down from the cable car station to St Michael's Cave because of the intense amount of traffic that they have to maneuver.
Okay. I would echo exactly, and I would thank Al and his group. Apart from the paths and things like that, whilst they're doing all this work, they come across a number of very interesting finds. In fact, I've got half a cut stone cannonball. They were finding it whilst they were clearing somewhere near my area.
You should have reported it to me.
It's still in my office.
It'll get there eventually.
Could we? I think what we've had so far is we've been focusing on negativity.
Yes.
What is wrong? I think what we should do is refocus the program and say each of us should come through and what our vision is.
Splendid. Well, before we talk about vision, how about switching the emphasis to being more positive? But Clive, can we ask you to storytell a little bit and tell us what the caves actually mean,
Yes.
what their story is.
Very, very short, very briefly, clearly. But the best way I can describe the case from the archaeological point of view, because there's also a biological dimension, is that they're wonderful archives. They accumulate data, and that data can come in the form of microscopic grains of pollen, charcoal from fires, fossil bones, and they allow us to reveal a wealth of information about the history of Gibraltar, going back 100,000 years. But it's not just about the history of Gibraltar, it's about the history of the Western Mediterranean and wider Europe, because there are very few archives of the quality of the ones that Gibraltar holds. And the story that they tell talks to us about climate change as well, talks to us about sea level change, about the dramatic impacts that climatic changes have on a place like Gibraltar, but more widely. So we have anything from the earliest Neanderthals to the medieval period. We have shepherds, Muslim shepherds, making campfire, tending goats on the Upper Rock. All that information comes from our archaeology. The problem with these caves, of course, is then they're particularly sensitive, and issues of access have to be carefully controlled. But of course, and the people on the other side here, Charlie and Keith, I'm sure will want to say more, but they are also wonderful reservoirs of biological diversity. And let's not just think of the big, large, sexy animals, but I mean, little invertebrates, some of which, could be particularly, have lived in these caves for years. I remember there was a Cambridge expedition in the 70s that came to look at this, and then after that, until these chaps have looked at it, nobody seems to have bothered about these things. But the bats, for example, even today, I was looking at a draft paper that we're going to submit for publication on the evolution of Gibraltar landscape. And it was funny to see the bats that we're finding in the fossil record are exactly the bats that you find around Gibraltar now. And one thing Gibraltar does tell us in that story is how resilient this part of the world has been to climate change. And if you went back and you look now, and a lot of the species are very similar or the same. But that is also important when you come to conserve, because not only are you conserving things that are important in their own right, but you're conserving a piece of very long history, species that have been here for hundreds of thousands of years, which we don't really have a right to just eliminate for whatever on a whim. So the story is a wonderful one, summarized very, very briefly and not very eloquently right now, but at least you get the gist of what I'm trying to say.
And we thank you. If a picture tells 1,000 words, and we've had some fantastic pictures that you and also GONHS have provided, and we thank you for those, and hopefully we can see a few more a little bit later on. Keith and Charlie, very briefly, for somebody who doesn't know how significant a migratory stop Gibraltar is, can you tell us that story very quickly?
Well, do you want to go?
Okay, I'll go. Well, looking at it from the natural history point of view, the Upper Rock Nature Reserve isn't like an African reserve with large animals, but yet it has a wealth of species, butterflies, moths. It's migration route for birds from Africa to Europe. We get thousands of eagles, hawks and falcons just flying over the heads of the tourists that use gate.
I think we're seeing some now on our screen.
Yes, they are apparently they don't even realize that this is happening at the time. Therefore, what you need is more interpretation, people that will be able to inform them about the wealth of wildlife that the Upper Rock has, apart from the normal tourist sites that we have. So, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's nothing like a good story to capture the imagination of somebody who's not initiated in a subject. With reference to migratory birds, I mean, several stories to be told. One of them, for example, is this: one of the most common migrating birds of prey past Gibraltar is the honey buzzard. It's a big eagle-like thing. Most people are surprised to hear that it's actually an insectivore. It eats wasp larvae almost exclusively. Right. It's an excellent flyer, migrates from Europe to tropical Africa in days. Some of them don't even eat because they've got such specialized diets. And also, whilst talking about bird migration, we can talk about the vegetation on the Upper Rock in general. I think you were at Dr. Darren Fudd's very interesting talk on the way that Gibraltar's landscape has been shaped. And it's really interesting that the vegetation on the Upper Rock has been shaped by man and other animals. Man is another animal that shapes his landscape, but not only that, the Upper Rock was originally probably denuded by man and goats and so forth. Most of the plants that are up there today, the larger shrubs, actually produce berries that are eaten by birds. And it's in fact in this way, through birds' droppings, that they managed to colonize the Upper Rock.
It's fascinating because you automatically think, or sort of certainly a childhood perception of nature is that that's the way it is and that's the way it always was, when that's not necessarily the case, is it? We're going to take a short commercial break. I'll just read Karen's email first. Karen, thank you for writing in. Karen says that she's a regular visitor to the Upper Rock. I think this is a question for you, Richard. She said she'd love to be able to go down to the lower batteries below Princess Caroline's, where there are two big guns overlooking Winston Churchill Avenue and the airport. I think she says she used to access them as a child, but unfortunately for many years they've been closed off by a gate mid-hill, impeding all access to them. Why aren't these batteries accessible to the public anymore, asks Karen. Do you have the answer, Richard?
Yes, I certainly do. I used to when I originally took over the gates, when I took over that area. In actual fact, it's not an area of land designated towards me. Okay? When I opened them up, I took 250 tons of rubbish out of there and replaced that with...
Sorry, 250 tons?
Of rubbish, yes. I then replaced that with about an equivalent amount of gravel, sand, to beautify the area and make it pleasant. I would leave the batteries open. We would be closed on a Saturday and a Sunday. Then I would come back on a Monday and I would have copious amounts of dog droppings, rubbish. You would have cigarette ashtrays which have been poured out, engine oil changes. You like it, the works. Right. Yeah. I then discussed this with the tourist board and said, look, the only way to maintain this is to close it off. If we had those wardens, it wouldn't be an issue.
Right.
But there aren't any wardens. That's the
well,
problem.
there you go. Maybe the wardens will solve that, and Karen will be able to visit. Yeah.
Well, Karen will be able to visit any time she wants, from 9:30 in the morning through till 4:30.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, well, we'll take a short commercial break. Tonight's Viewpoint is on the Upper Rock, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Really badly, and we're working within the government to see ways in which we can deal with this. Forbes Quarry, the site of the first Neanderthal skull, we've had to repair the gates on 4 occasions now. And again, the little interpretation centre we had inside has been totally trashed. And within the Upper Rock, we have the stay-behind cave tunnel system that we discovered a number of years ago. And because it was so fragile, we took the decision, there are cork floors, for example, for minimum noise. This is the place where 6 British officers were going to hide should the Germans, the Nazis, take over Gibraltar. So we protected it with gates, and we've now had to do it on 3 occasions because people come in. But you have to understand the lie of the land there to see how difficult it is. But the equipment to open the bars must include grinders, generators.
Wow.
One access is through Mediterranean steps, a little hole with bars. That has now been cut through. It saddens me to go into these areas that have been sealed for 50, 60 years and find graffitis from the day before yesterday. And you go back and you spend money, the government will help to put this back, and 2 weeks later, and it's almost at an industrial level of vandalism. This is not a few kids getting in somewhere. They're going with heavy-duty equipment.
Which must be extremely disheartening for anyone who's working in the industry.
It is disheartening. We always jump back and do it again. But if we cannot protect something like Stay Behind, some of the other batteries and monuments really have no hope. But it seems to be a trend that is increasing in the last year, we've noticed. And I don't know what is causing it.
Well, hopefully wardens will go some way towards tackling that, but I suppose there's also an element of education involved there, and then perhaps we can pick up on that in just a moment. But I think we might have Clive on the line. Good evening, Clive. Okay, Clive's not there, but we'll come back to that in just a moment. Keith, the role of education, trying to really get people to appreciate the value of biodiversity, of heritage. Are we doing enough in schools at the moment, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think schools are a separate issue to some extent, except that they can inspire the sort of civic pride that you mentioned, and I think that's the key really to all of these vandalism issues.
Are there modules which
people have to be proud of what Gibraltar has to offer rather than...
And I know a lot of people will say, well, you know, education starts at home, not in the school, and I'm sure that's very true. But are there modules, say, on Gibraltar's plants and bird life and the rest of it? There aren't, are there?
No, there aren't to any meaningful extent. I think if you talk to educators, they'd probably tell you that that's because they follow the national curriculum. But I think that in terms of things like vandalism, I think that those are things that you learn at home and not at school. So.
On education, I mean, you know, on the heritage side, if you like prehistory, I know Darren Farr in our team, as education officer, has done sterling work over the years by providing the teaching aids for schools. There is a book on Neanderthals and prehistory, for example, and other aspects of the history of the Great Siege and so on. I don't know if there's an equivalent in biology, but I know, for example, we should also recognize the efforts of the Heritage Trust. I know Mario Mosquera is very keen and has been taken to Jews Gate, your site, this last weekend and this weekend, young children out of his own time to show them about the bird ringing that you do and so on. And I think we have to recognize the efforts of these individuals. What I think we need now is a more concerted system.
Sure.
We have all the middle schools come through our sites as part. Mainly they're doing, as far as local history is concerned, they do a block on the evacuation. In which case we have a very, very good selection of photographs to deal with the evacuees, both going away and returning. They then do a tunnel tour and they get to appreciate what their history is.
Well, I mean, in terms of compelling stories, recent history, Gibraltar's recent history, if you look at the military installations and the tunnels and all the rest of it, I mean, surely it doesn't get much more compelling and exciting than that, and we've got it on our doorstep.
James Bond stuff.
Exactly. It
really
is Indiana Jones, isn't it?
My business relies on compelling stories, because you have a guided tour through the World War II tunnels, you have a guided walking tour through the centre of town, and you have a tour of probably what were the premier guns in Gibraltar, how they worked, where they didn't go. We managed to obtain a 1948 training film, and it really is glorious in terms of imperial music.
Imperial Britain.
It's fascinating. There's 48 minutes of it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Right, we'll say good evening to Mrs. Garcia, who's on the line now. Your question or viewpoint, Mrs. Garcia?
Oh, my question is directed to any one of the gentlemen at the panel. This might not, come into what the discussion is about right now, but it goes back to the discussion we were having about implementation of wardens in the Upper Rock. I find that perfectly fine. The idea sounds great, but what would happen to the security guards that are presently there?
Well, is that a question that we can tackle?
I would imagine they do a different
job. I don't think it's a question we can tackle, but I think, as Clive says, the function is very different. They're there to direct traffic, and so exactly.
It wouldn't be to replace them.
Yeah.
No, they're there primarily to maintain the entries to the site, both at Moorish Castle and at Jews Gate, and ensure that traffic flow is consistent. But you won't find security guards anywhere else on the Upper Rock, except at closing time when they travel through and make sure that there's no cars.
The wardens would be there in part to enforce the Nature Protection Act, which was enacted in 1991 and actually makes provision for wardens. So the legislation is there already.
Right.
It's a question of putting it into action.
So in theory, security guards, their job should be safe in that respect. There's plenty of work, I suppose, to be done up there. Okay, let's say good evening to Clive, who hopefully is on the line now.
Yes.
Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Your question or viewpoint, please.
Yes, I've got several questions, but I'm only asking you 3 of them.
If they're quick, please.
Which one of them is, as Richard says, that should be hop on, hop off.
Yep.
And that's a very good idea, but I think we've got a better idea than that one. Ticket system that everybody should get the money, equal everybody the same on all transportation issue. And the money should stay in Gibraltar, not in Spain. That's one of them.
Right.
The other one is, as Charles says, transport. Transport, yes. If the last government would have issued 10 more licenses, then it would have been more space for the people who've got the license now and for all the taxi drivers. And before, they used to stop the private cars going up the rock. And now they leave open for everybody. So it's one of those days it's going to be an accident there and everybody's going to burn up.
Oh, goodness me,
Thank
we
you
hope
very
not.
much indeed.
Thank
And
you
the
for
other
your call.
question is that a ticket, when they sell it, they should sell it and give at least 1 hour so we can reach the last entrance of the castle. Not that we pay for the ticket and we only got 30 minutes to reach the whole system. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Clive, for your contributions. Please do, yes.
Thank you, Clive. Yes. I think government is probably allowing private cars to go up because they pay considerably more than you do, in fact double what you pay. And they require the funds as much as possible. Now, as far as tickets are concerned, whenever I go anywhere and I buy a ticket, the ticket tells me how much it costs, what I'm entitled to see, how I can see it. If you're on a guided operator ticket, you get a neutral ticket, which tells you what time you go in it and what time you come in out. You don't know how much you've paid, and you don't know how much you're entitled to see.
Right.
Okay? Why is that? Because that gives the flexibility to operators, taxi drivers, whoever's operating up there, to say, right, my tour includes St. Michael's Cave, the Apes, and back down to town. Doesn't include the Great Siege Galleries or the castle. Okay? So there is a certain degree of institutional sharp practice. Okay? Now, I think arising from what we've said there, look, we have a plethora of things which we can do here. If you can allow me 1 minute, I'll give you just a quick word picture of what it could be like.
This is your vision of what the overall, how it should be managed.
You imagine arriving in Gibraltar, and the first thing which you do is you go to an interpretation centre, which shows you exactly what's available for you to do. You then mount a road train, which would be a hybrid vehicle, okay, which takes you around different stops. Now, whatever turns you on, or whatever your buzz is, you've got the time and the leisure to be able to do it. If it's bird watching and there's migration to the south, you can stop off there at Jew's Gate. If it's migration and they're coming from the north, hopefully Rock Gun will be open. You can go there. If not, you can go to the batteries where I'm located, which is an ideal location to see it. Now, the road train goes up onto the rock and then comes down and enters into the Second World War tunnels. You come out at the Kelpie end and you hit the castle. In terms of time, you're probably one of the oldest buildings here in Gibraltar, Arab Gibraltar. You then go round and you get up onto the batteries, where we have a wonderful building which is not exploited at all. Okay? The Willis's magazine, which could be another interpretation centre, a food and beverage centre, a toilet centre, somewhere for you to be able to relax and sit inside and enjoy your day. From there you can go to the World War II tunnels, or you can go to the Great Siege Galleries. Now, by having this system, you relieve the tremendous amount of pressure which there is on the one side. I cannot for the life of me imagine how 1,000 people descending on the same place at the same time can be fun for anybody. This is like a frontier queue. You've all got to pass through
That's
one
your minute up, Richard, but it is a compelling story, and I can see how that might work.
If I could just add to that,
Please.
I mean, I don't think you can do all of the things that Richard has described in a day, but I think that that's the point.
And I haven't finished with the vision.
I think we need to get away.
You imagine if you go for nautical Gibraltar and you develop Rosia,
as well.
yeah, you could have dolphin trips from there. You can use the vitamin yard. You can jump on a boat and go round the rock to visit Gorham's Cave. You don't actually step off, but you can see it.
There's talk this week of a shipwreck.
And then you end up spending a few days in Gibraltar rather than just
The
5 hours.
impression is, if it's the day tripper, to say, hey, I want more of this.
Exactly, there's more to see than
That
what
goes back to the original problem I was saying, which is how do you make that switch, which I've been hearing. Part of the problem is, please correct me if I'm wrong, we really don't have the hotel beds for that kind of thing, do we? Because if you want people to stay in Gibraltar for a number of days and do that, you need to provide the accommodation.
Absolutely.
Do we have the accommodation to do
No,
that?
but I think...
So therefore, to change this into this kind of system, which I agree, requires a significant big picture vision.
But you can do it. You can do it on a daily visitor type of basis.
But I suppose what we're saying is that there'd be less visitors to the Rock, as you said, 10-pounders as opposed to 100 1-pounders. 1,300 beds in Gibraltar at the moment.
I totally disagree with that philosophy.
Which philosophy?
That we're going to have less customers.
Oh, you don't think we'll have less?
Absolutely.
Because I was going to say, I mean, we don't have a taxi driver association representative on the panel tonight, but I did speak to them beforehand, and apparently they're going to be part of a government...
Tourist Advisory Board.
Well, there you go. Which you yourself are a member of, Richard.
Yep.
I mean, when it comes down to it, I know we're talking about sustainability, I suppose, in the Upper Rock, and money is a big part of sustainability. It has to work financially, otherwise, the rest of it is meaningless.
Well, obviously, the takings from the ticket office should be invested into the product, and unfortunately, in the past, it's always gone to the Carmarthen coffers. And very little investment has gone back into the Upper Rock. Obviously, we have to look at aspects of how this money could improve sites, could improve the product so that the tourist coming will appreciate, and the quality that we will develop from that.
Well, we're looking at the Tower of Homage at the moment, Professor Finlayson. What do you think might happen there?
Well, I'm very hopeful. We did a major restoration there in 2005, and we are now gearing ourselves up for the rest of the castle. Part of the work that we did about 10 years ago was to bring in consultants to have a new prison for Gibraltar, which Gibraltar needed socially, but also to release this other site. So I think that the release of that would open up, for me, Gibraltar's second most important heritage.
And money is a big part of sustainability. It has to work financially, otherwise, the rest of it is meaningless.
Well, obviously, the takings from the ticket office should be invested into the product, and unfortunately, in the past, it's always gone to the Carmarthen coffers, and very little investment has gone back into the Upper Rock. Obviously, we have to look at aspects of how this money could improve sites, could improve the product so that the tourist coming will appreciate, and the quality that we will develop from that.
Well, we're looking at the Tower of Homage at the moment, Professor Finlayson. What do you think might happen there?
Well, I'm very hopeful. We did a major restoration there in 2005, and we are now gearing ourselves up for the rest of the castle. Part of the work that we did about 10 years ago was to bring in consultants to have a new prison for Gibraltar, which Gibraltar needed socially, but also to release this other site. So I think that the release of that would open up, for me, Gibraltar's second most important heritage asset. The first one I would obviously argue is GONHS, but the Moorish Castle would be the second. Depends on the angle. We're not going to go into ranking. But I think it opens up the possibility of a massive project, which then links up, coming back to what the kind of thing is doing, the old urban part of the town all the way down to Casements. And I love going to places like Cordova, for example, which has the old Juderia, the little side streets and the mosque. And I see so much life there with restaurants and bars. And then I see the little quaint narrow streets that we have at the back of Gibraltar. Now, this is not Upper Rock, apologies, but it links up.
Think of them
and you can see it. And you can see the possibilities that they have. But I'd like to come back, if I may, to sustainability, because the thing that worries me about this, we've been doing a lot of talking, perhaps rightly, about the tourism side, perhaps less about the actual product, particularly the biological product, which is very sensitive to impact. And if we're looking at short-term gains at different levels, then what we're doing today could arguably be correct. But if we want to have a product for our children and our grandchildren, then we have to stop what we're doing now.
We have to stop what we're doing now.
Well, we have to seriously think about what we're doing now. because we're going to kill it.
This was I suppose, what it boiled down to when your report was presented. I think that the clip on the TV, Charlie, from what you said, was that you wanted numbers reduced. You think that we can't have the same number of visitors or the growth in visitors to the Upper Rock that we have had for recent years?
Visitors have to be controlled, and one of the opportunities that we offered in this report was the Europark Federation. Europark Federation is a network of nature reserves, conservation areas in Europe, and they all have a European Charter for Sustainable Tourism in protected areas. Now, we could tap into this resource. They could provide us with a lot of interesting recommendations which we could implement. We could have an exchange of staff so that we can see how their parks work and how their sustainable tourism programs work, and be able to incorporate it into the Upper Rock Nature Reserve. So what we're looking at is not only reducing the amount of visitors, but improving the quality and improving the quality of the visitor that comes to Gibraltar as well.
Which is what Professor Bensusan was referring to
Quality
earlier.
of the visit is key.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the issues being raised is if we up the ante in terms of price, would we get less customers? I have to tell you that 80% of what goes to the Costa del Sol in terms of tours sold by Spanish operators come to Gibraltar.
Yes.
Okay?
So there's a large
It's a
market.
magnet. It's a magnet.
Yes.
Now, if we have suddenly retention from the Spanish operators to say, we won't promote Gibraltar anymore, I'm telling you, in Gibraltar we have sufficient resourcefulness, finance, and ability to go and get that customer.
Right. Okay.
Now, the Spaniards can either bring it,
Yes.
or we'll go fetch it.
There's no comparable product.
No.
Absolutely.
Ronda is the nearest thing. And
The
But even
Alhambra,
that, Ronda is the
Gibraltar
but that's
certainly.
what gets closest, isn't it? And then, so you call that the bluff.
Yeah,
So
but
you guys are confident that the product is good?
I am super confident.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have spoiled the golden goose
absolutely.
ourselves through greed, through mismanagement, through the ability of, well, if I drop the price, he's going to go into ruin, I'm going to be able to get his licenses. Hey, what's happened is we have dropped the price to such a stage where you now go back and you say, no, this is not real. Well, okay, well, if you don't do it, Joe will do it. And if Joe doesn't do it, Fred will do it. And you see every year companies changing who the transporters are, because that is being affected.
I think it is potentially possible as well to increase the number of visitors and yet decrease the impact on each individual site.
Yes.
Because what we need to do is diversify the product. Gibraltar is about so much more than just monkeys and cigarettes. And that's what we need to get away from.
Sure. Okay, we've got a series of emails here. Maybe we can try and get through them in maybe like something like quick fire manner. Brian firstly says, rather than just or beyond just a general warden, what about having macaque attendants? He thinks that there was a pilot study which was successful in this respect. Have you got a comment to make on that, Charlie or Keith?
I suppose it's just a name change. The function would be primarily the same, as making sure that nobody feeds the macaques, providing information to the tourists on the biology and other aspects of the babbling macaques, be they wardens or be they macaque attendants.
It's in a name, but
I would rather call them wardens because a
You want to
warden
have
can
the
attend to
policing.
macaque issues and other
Okay,
issues
so
too.
It's not just about
Yeah.
macaques.
But we
It
want
isn't
these
just.
people to be champions of the biodiversity that
The
they're
iconic photograph
overlooking.
for Gibraltar and the tourist is to have a
Monkey on the shoulder.
on your shoulder.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you stop that?
With difficulty, I suppose.
Very simple. You frighten people. You say, these animals carry infections. They may bite you. Your holiday may be spoiled.
Yes,
You
it-
suddenly don't get...
It
No,
does-
thank
it
you,
does
I won't have
happen,
the
but,
photograph.
yeah. So what do you mean, maybe that the tour operators or whoever's up there doesn't do
I know apes, where you put your hand in your pocket, you shake it, the ape is looking at you, and you point with your finger, and that's where the ape will jump.
Really?
I know apes where you go high five,
Really?
because they've been trained.
Yeah,
They've been trained.
For those of us who look at primates and so on, that's not surprising.
They're
They're
smart
highly
animals, aren't they?
intelligent
Absolutely.
creatures. That should not be surprising.
One of the things about this aspect of the macaques, though, is that, and I'm sure Charlie and Clive will be able to tell you as well, a lot of, shall we say, nature lovers or nature viewers who come to Gibraltar aren't actually all that keen about the macaques, precisely because of their clowning and antics, and they would much rather see animals in the wild than doing that sort of thing. I think that people are becoming increasingly sophisticated in what they expect from a tourist product.
Okay, we've got quite a few emails. This is one of the more interesting ones. Lenice says, is there any scope for a small camping site in the Upper Rock?
Camping site? No, but we provided provisions for picnic areas. Governor's Lookout has always been the Scouts camp, and there are areas in the periphery where picnics have always taken place.
Sure.
In the past.
Okay.
Obviously, we don't have a lot of flat land on the Upper Rock. It's very steep, and therefore you can't accommodate that sort of thing. And camping, unfortunately, would lead to more refuse
it's a small site. The footprint would exactly.
It would impact too bad.
It's a nice idea, but not practical.
You have a dearth of sanitation up there. Secondly, you have the risk of fire.
We've got a few more emails, but let's go to Chris, who's on the line. Good evening, Chris. Your viewpoint or question, please.
Yeah, hi. I've been listening to your program for the last 15 minutes. A few observations I have. One is I've always felt in the 40 years that I've known Gibraltar, there's always been an absence of mindset in government circles about the Upper Rock, which to me is the jewel of where I live now. The other thing is, well, you talk about wardens. What legal powers would they be expected to have in terms of security and safety during the periods that the Upper Rock is open? Because what I'm thinking is that you have a police force here. Is the Upper Rock actually excluded from the policing of that part of the rock? And if that's the case, why should you have to face having to employ wardens when there is a police force already here on the rock? The sterling work that's being done by a few people, one or two on your panel, seems to indicate that there is the will. However, it's not supported, as I see it, by government ministers, whatever their persuasion. And until you actually get that, I'm afraid that Gibraltar will always be a poor location for getting people here to spend more than 2 days to enjoy the benefits that it has produced in terms of its heritage.
All right, Chris, thanks ever so much for your call. I suppose if we get drawn into the politics of this, we might be here for
it's unfortunate that Chris has only been watching for 15 minutes because we touched upon this at the beginning of the programme and explained that the police are in fact stretched. Also, with regards to the law, I believe the Upper Rock Designation Order, which was passed, or Act now, which was passed in 1993, outlines the warden's duties and responsibilities.
Okay. Let's go to a few of the emails. Carl says that, in his opinion, at the moment, tourists and citizens of the Rock alike have to, if they want to enjoy the Upper Rock, they have to do so in a polluted environment. He thinks that being a nature reserve, it should be walked through and enjoyed in a healthy manner. I suppose, is that maybe idealistic thinking?
I think one of the ironies of all this is when the Upper Rock was first called a nature reserve, it's after that it's become less of a nature reserve. And that is a little bit of an irony. But of course, the problem here is how do you meet all the stakeholders, the transporters, the tourism, all the tourism people, the biologists, the ecologists, how do you meet all this and make it sustainable? And that's a big challenge.
It is a big challenge because even at the end of this year, we had record number of visitors to the Upper Rock, 829,000 visitors.
Correct.
It is totally unsustainable. And even vehicular traffic reaches its peak in Easter because of private cars and tourists reaching 16,000 cars in a month. It only drops slightly during the summer months because the local population is on the beaches. But the amount of traffic and pollution that this causes, the nature reserve is tremendous.
Issue, which is we were talking about before the program. There isn't sufficient monitoring. We know general numbers going to the Upper Rock. How many people go into St. Michael's Cave, for example?
Exactly.
That statistic is not available. But people are affecting the cave environment. And to me, St. Michael's Cave has almost been a sacrificial cave. Yeah. But St. Michael's Cave is very important as well. And it hurts me to see all the algal growth because of the lighting. At some point, some sort of what I call Daleks were put there. I don't know how much that costs for a sort of son and lumiere. Another disappeared gladly. Concrete all around the cave. But the monitoring is important, and we need to have good solid statistics, and that's a generalized problem, because that would allow us, it's not just a question of numbers, but how many are on Queen's Road, how many are on the Upper Road, what do they do, all these kinds of things.
And we need to get feedback from the
This could be
tourists as
possibly part of the task that the wardens could do, which keep some critical record of what is going, because without that information, really the decisions are subjective to a certain degree.
Guys, I'm afraid we've only got 2 minutes left in the programme. Can we perhaps wrap up with some optimistic thinking? We're approaching a period when government is going to conduct a consultation exercise and ask everybody, I suppose, who might have a view on the matter, what they'd like to see of the Upper Rock and what they'd like to be done differently. What are the most important things for you in a nutshell? Perhaps we can start with Professor Finlayson.
Well, I think that the positive thing is that in spite of everything, there is still a lot up there, which makes it a wonderful place. And therefore, we haven't reached the threshold which would make it the point of no return. So, although I've said this has been spoken about, certainly in my time now since the early 80s, that I'm familiar with, or even earlier, and perhaps the response is not. We've been aware, we know what we need to do, but we just don't do it. We haven't gone far enough that we still cannot act and do it. So I would like to end on that positive note.
So you're optimistic that we can make
we
it?
can do it, but it's up to all of us. This is Gibraltar. It belongs to all of us, and we should all want this. And I hope that we all do sufficiently, because it's a wonderful product that we have. It's a green area as well, a lung. We haven't talked about that, but at the same time, it helps the economy. But we should also, for the sheer ethical protection of those organisms that live up there and have a right to exist.
Okay, Richard, what are your thoughts? Are you optimistic?
Very much so. The key decisions facing this government at the present moment is: do we continue with the fast food restaurant, or do we go for a Michelin star? Well, people walk away from here and they think, had an excellent crack. And I have to tell you, they're working very hard at that. I had the pleasure of meeting the Deputy Chief Minister, Dr Cortez and Mr Costa, recently. I know they have charged the CEO of the Tourist Board to produce a strategy paper. I think they appreciate the seriousness of the state we're at, the seriousness and the number of people employed in this industry, which is a factor which we haven't discussed. The ability which we have, if we devolve this particular product, it could give tremendous amount of employment. I mean, I work at 20% of my capacity at the moment. I could be employing a great deal more people, young people. I'll give you, if you permit me, just one quick example.
In 30 seconds?
I've had a number of trainees who came to me and they've worked with me. Academically, there were no hopers. They've been working with me for 2 or 3 years. Some of them have gone back now to do languages as GCSEs. They've gone into history in a big way. They love what they do. So what we're doing is we're giving people an opportunity. It's what is, after all, a wonderful industry.
It's capturing the imagination.
If it's run correctly, it's win-win for everybody concerned. Not only that, there's an element of pride. I'm proud about my town. I'd hate anybody to walk away from here and say bloody rubbish.
Good, well let's hope they don't. Charlie, what do you think? Will the good work that's gone into the action and management plan reap rewards?
I think so. I think from GONHS' perspective, we're glad that the report has seen the light of day finally. There are a lot of goals and objectives that are still valid today that can be put into fruition, and I'm sure that the government will use this as a template to further the nature reserve and produce a sustainable tourist product that we should be proud about.
Keith, are you confident that in maybe a matter of years we might have a sustainable Upper Rock which manages to combine both the pressures that tourism brings, as well as obviously the financial benefits, and the biodiversity of a nature reserve?
I wouldn't say I'm confident, but I'm hopeful.
Okay.
And in terms of improving the product, I've got a list of points here, and I think that if we diversify, we increase interpretation, have quality informed guides at sites, look towards perhaps reducing the numbers visiting each site, but not revenue, obviously, providing more for the walker. It's a nature reserve, you need to provide for the walker. And finally, and this is actually a matter that Clive touched upon in his museum lecture series talk a couple of months ago, developing themes and linking sites and experiences to create a holistic experience for the visitor. I think that's the way to go forward.
Okay, well, exciting times. And we must thank Salvador, Alfred, Giselle, Jonathan, and the many others who have written in. We haven't had time to get to your emails, but we do thank you for writing in. We're running out of time, but yes?
I think it's a great report, and that should be acknowledged. They've done a lot of hard work. Some people may agree with bits and not others, but I think, well done.
Certainly improved my Latin.
Well, there you go. Gents, it's been an interesting discussion, but I'm afraid that's where we need to leave it tonight. Thanks a lot to my panel, Professor Clive Finlayson, Richard Desoisa, Charlie Perez, and Dr. Keith Bensusan. Thank you for your calls and emails. Viewpoint will be back in 2 weeks' time with Paul Grant, and next Thursday, Nikki Ryan will be here at 9 with her 9 o'clock shop. From Viewpoint and the rest of the team, good night.